calls the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Zarzaki, can you please call roll?
Mr. Roman?
Here.
Ms. Chick?
Here.
John Zarzaki present. Mr. Kuzma is absent. Mr. Quinto is currently absent. Mrs. Monte? Present. Mr. Dry? Present.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Almost on his way. Everyone received a copy of the agenda. I make a motion to approve the agenda. Support by Ms. Chick. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. We'll call to the public. Anyone wishing to address the planning commission may do so. Seeing none, move on. Should be no clarifications. We'll go to number 7, Ms. Bird. At the time the packet was sent, is there any correspondence?
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll move to public hearings. Although it looks pretty ambitious, I think it should go smoothly. I'll describe what happens. We'll go by each amendment that's proposed in the public hearing. I will let Mr. Whippins give a brief overview of which we have talked, all these we have talked about at great length in the past 2 to 3 months. At that time, we'll be called to the public to make any comments for the hearing, and then we'll close it. So we'll begin with make a motion to open it for public hearing, the general provisions, accessory uses in buildings, amending Article 4, Section 36-98D2. Supported by Ms. Chick. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Mr. Lewis.
Yes, this and the next 3 amendments we're considering tonight are to clarify the requirements for accessory buildings in the yard and whether they are required to meet the established yard setbacks for buildings in the district or are subject to a separate requirement, which is for a minimum 5-foot setback for detached accessory structures like sheds and the like. There was just some discrepancy between the ordinance, which we are pointing out in this and the next several.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I will look forward to any comment, public comment. Seeing none, I make a motion to close amendment Article 4, Section 36-98D2. Supported by Mr. Zarzaki. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item B, amend Article 8, Section 36-2184, SR1 single-family residential regulations to standard yard setback requirements. Make a motion to open public hearing for that. Supported by Ms. Chick. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Mr. Williams.
Yeah, so this is the section for the side yard setbacks for accessory buildings, specifically within the single-family residential.
Thank you. At this time, we'll hear anyone from the public. 3 minutes.
Hi, we're 558 Elm Road. I was just curious, there's a whole lot of housekeeping taking residents to improve their homes, protect their properties, that this stuff is actually part of a bigger movement to upgrade and update the whole ordinance scheme we have, because it seems like it's just a lot of tiny little things, but hopefully it's leading to something else. That's all.
Thank you. These came from the zoning administrator, which are clarifications on certain ordinance items that needed to be addressed so that it was clear and concise for not only the public but her. And Mr. Lippens, do you have any further comment?
I would just say, to answer the question, that yes, this is a part of a larger process we're going through to update the zoning ordinance to address several issues and priorities the township has. This first batch is representative of some technical changes, but also some changes that have time sensitivity, like later on the agendas of fireworks, temporary use amendment. So it's housekeeping, but it's part of a larger process that needs to be confirmed.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, make a motion to close public hearing for Article 8, Section 36-2.4. Support by Mr. Zarzaki. Any questions on that? All in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Move to item C, amend Article 9, Section 36-2.484. Make a motion to open a public hearing for that. Support by Ms. Chick. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Mr. Wilkins.
Similarly, this is now looking at the SR2 single-family residential district, still pertaining to accessory building side yard requirements.
Thank you. So at this time, we'll go to the public, any public comment on that. Seeing none, I'll make a motion to close public hearing for amendment to Article 9. Support by Mr. Zarzaki. All in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Go to item D. I'll make a motion to open for public hearing to amend Article 10, Section 36-2784.
I'll support.
Supported by Ms. Chick. Any questions? All in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Mr. Lippens.
I'd like to apologize for being late.
No problem. Later.
We're now looking at the multifamily residential district, same subject matter, the accessory building setback requirements and side yards.
Thank you. We'll go to for any public comment. Seeing none, I make a motion to close the public hearing on the amendment of Article 10. Support by Mr. Zarzaki. Any questions on that? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, make a motion to open for public hearing, the amendment of Article 2, definitions, waterfront setbacks.
I'll support.
Support by Ms. Chick. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Mr. Lippens.
This amendment deals with the setback for waterfront properties, and specifically it clarifies where that setback is taken from.
Thank you. Any public comments on that? Seeing none, I make a motion that we close the public hearing to amend Article 2. Support by Mr. Zarzaki. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. I make a motion to open for public hearing to amend Article 2, definitions, equipment services addition.
I'll support.
Supported by Ms. Chick. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Mr. Lippens.
Yes, so there are several zoning districts in the township that permitted use for equipment services, that use was not defined. This addition of this definition will help clarify what types of activities are permitted as, or in the scale of equipment services.
Thank you, Mr. Lippens. Any public comment on that? Seeing none, I make a motion we close public hearing to amend Article 2. Support by Mr. Zarzaki. Any questions on that? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. G, I make a motion we amend Article 24, section, open for public hearing to amend Article 24, section 36-724, supplementary regulations and standards, holiday sales. Is there support? Supported by Ms. Chick. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Mr. Lippens.
Yes, this amendment deals with modifying a prior existing section of the ordinance which permitted temporary Christmas tree sales, but didn't substantially address other types of holiday sales. So we went through, discussed the other holidays that might have sales that should be permitted, and revised the ordinance accordingly.
Thank you. Will the public for any comment? Seeing none, I make a motion we close the public hearing to amend Article 24, section 36-724. Supported by Mr. Zarzaki. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. And H, I make a motion to amend, or open for public hearing to amend Article 4, section 36-98F, general provisions, yard measurements. Supported by Ms. Chick. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Mr. Lippens.
Yes, this section of, or this ordinance revision deals with the clarification specifically of overhangs and how overhangs will be calculated with the measurement of required yards.
Thank you. We'll go to the public. Any comments? Seeing none, I make a motion we close public hearing to amend Article 4. Supported by Mr. Zarzaki. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. That concludes the public hearings. We'll move on to agenda item number 9, reports to committees. Board of Trustees report, Ms. Chick.
The board met on May 8th, the Washington County Road Commission presented a work plan for Northfield roads. The board approved 3 dust control applications and limestone patching is needed. Also 700 feet up Kearney Road where the road washes out each spring. The corner of Spencer and 5 Mile Road that will need a culvert and ditching. And then Dixboro 5 Mile to 528 feet north of 6 Mile. The board also approved a proposal by the DDA to engage a design engineer to evaluate 75 Barker and make recommendations for bringing the structure up to code. And the board also approved getting a bid for an appraiser to determine the real estate value of 75 Barker. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Chick. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll go to the ZBA. Mr. Kuzma is absent. Staff report, Ms. Bird.
No.
Thank you. Planning consultant report, Mr. Lippens.
Nothing tonight is not on the agenda.
Thank you. Parks and Recs, Mr. Aquino.
Yes, thank you. We do have a meeting tomorrow at 7 o'clock here in this building, open to the public. The community garden is live and ready for any individuals. We still do have a couple open plots, so contact Jennifer Carlisle here at the township office, and she can give you assistance. And I'm appreciative we're discussing park rules on the agenda today. Thank you.
Thank you. Downtown planning group report, Ms. Monte.
That's his lesson.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to item 10, unfinished business. We have Jomar Drive, private road, north of East North Territorial Road and east of US 23. Is there representatives here tonight from Jomar?
Yes.
Broadway with the Western Consultant, and also with me as the applicant, Jim Kugler with Balls Growth Investments. Mr. Chair, I'd like to bring over one that we prepared.
Sure.
Visual plan.
Thank you.
So would you like me to go ahead and kind of
Sure.
present what we've done? Last time we were here, it was a little bit colder, it was January, and so what we've done is we took comments that the planning commission had, and your planning consultant also, and just to refresh all our minds. The issues back at the time were natural features, specifically wetlands, and also landmark trees, and also talk about natural features inventory analysis. So early February, we had a meeting with Paul, Mrs. Bird, and with OHM, and we did get direction to go ahead and prepare the natural features impact statement, which we've done, and we've provided to the township, both on the plans and an 8.5 by 11 inch booklet. So I was just kind of walk around here. And also what we heard the commission wanted to, there was talk about, we didn't really have an overall sheet showing surrounding properties and showing impacts to the wetlands and what were we really doing. So we came up with this sheet that we added to the package, basically an overall natural features plan. But what I'd like to point out is a couple things we do state on there is we note the total acreage of wetlands on the sites and what we've impacted. So we're impacting 0.06 acres, and we actually have a little calculation right here. So what we say is on the site there's 15.99 acres of wetlands, and we do say that we're preserving 15.79 acres of wetland, meaning that 98.75 of the existing wetland will be preserved. So that was kind of a question that the commission had last time that we've addressed. And also to speak about the wetland permit, we did get word from the MDEQ that the permit decision date is June 6th, so we should have a permit in hand by June 6th for that. We went through the natural features impact statement, and just in summary found that what we thought we had probably found, that there's impacts to the Indiana bat and the rattlesnake. So we've made provisions on the plans to address those. Proposing to only cut down any trees that the township approves tonight, after October and before March, so not this time of year. So we've addressed that on the plans, and then we've made some provisions for the rattlesnakes. Like for example, you can't use that in the silt fence. You can't use that fabric that they would get caught up in. So we've addressed that. We put that on the plans. We did propose a tree, landmark tree mitigation plan that you have in your packet, and I have here on the floor where we're proposing to mitigate some trees. And I know Mr. Lippens will go through his report, but one of the things that he did identify in his report, he was asking for 4 additional trees. And this plan that I have up here adds the 4 trees above what you have in your package. So we've done that. So with that, I think we've done what we could to provide the tree mitigation plan and the natural features impact statement.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. If you could stand by at the podium, what I'll do is have Mr. Lippens and Mr. Cavallaro go through their reports, and then the Planning Commission, if they have any questions, which there'll be some, and you can answer them. Thank you. Mr. Lippens.
Yes, so when we met last, we did talk about tree mitigation as being one of the things we were interested in making sure was addressed by the private road. We also asked for a comprehensive natural features impact statement and a layout of how the lots could potentially be designed. There were also questions about the wetland mitigation and the impact to wetlands. And I think that the natural features statement provided does a good job of providing and answering some of the questions that Planning Commission had. I think one of the bigger questions was when the lots created by this development are developed, will there be more natural features impacts? I think now you have a fairly good understanding of what the natural features are and can imagine what would need to be preserved by future development and potential buildable area as well. This exhibit, I think, does a good job of explaining how the site could be developed and what types of impacts we'll need to make sure are mitigated or features are protected in any future development. I think that the exhibit also does a good job of showing why this particular location for a road would have the least amount of impact or site disturbance, which was another one of Planning Commission's concerns when we discussed the proposed private road at the last time. So the current proposal does propose mitigating, some tree mitigation. It doesn't defer it. They say they'll put the trees in with the private road. And that's a voluntary mitigation activity by the applicant. I think for discussion tonight, I'm interested in knowing if Planning Commission feels that this natural impact statement has provided us sufficient detail, if it sets a good tone for any, evaluating any future development on this site. And if so, I think proceeding with an approval is my recommended course of action. I would, of course, want to review the plan to make sure those trees are provided. I got this today, but I think expressing a willingness to add those additional trees is shows good faith on the part of the applicant. And our engineer is here to discuss the permit requirements and engineering requirements.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce this is Mr. Ron Cavallaro, representing Northfield Township with OHM. Welcome tonight. Go ahead if you'd like to give your report.
Sure. We have a letter dated January 9th, 2018. In that letter, we note that it's a Class A private road, approximately 1,400 feet long, and that the plans are in compliance with the standards and requirements of the private road ordinance, section 36-719. We note that there are some permits required, which Mr. Wagner has noted that the DEQ wetlands permit will be issued, it sounds like, on June 6th. And I think I've seen an email from the fire department regarding that he does not have any issues with the private road either. But we're still waiting for Washtenaw County WRC. And besides that, then there's just the requirements of insurances and escrows prior to construction.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cavallaro. We'll open it up to questions and comments by the Planning Commission. Someone like to start?
I have two, if I may. got a note on Lot B that 4.7 acres of trees to be preserved, and it encompasses just about all of Lot B. Does that mean Lot B will never be developed, or at this stage you won't touch the trees and then we revisit it when someone comes in with a plan for Lot B?
This Lot B right
Right.
here, yeah,
Yep.
you're talking about, no, that's a potential developable site.
Okay.
They would have to go through Northfield Township's requirements for tree mitigation when they, if you allow them to do that. So,
Okay.
I mean, we see it as a developable lot, but it would have to meet your approval.
Okay. All right, second question was, all the mitigated trees going up the lot lines between two industrial areas, why were those trees put there when the residential areas are up to the northwest? Were they just there to show some good faith, or is there a better place for them rather than, between the construction company's land and some industrial building that will be next door? You probably don't need a whole lot of pretty trees between them. Is there a better place for them?
Yeah, right, and we just saw an opening there, and the number of trees is what Mr. Kugler is, willing to plant, and if you needed them up on the north end along
That's
the
what I'm
property
wondering.
line up
Thank you
there.
for them, we'll take them.
Yeah,
But
the reason,
is there
the reason.
somewhere better you
yeah.
can put them?
We didn't put them here because there's natural screening, but we could certainly add to that instead of putting them here. So we could locate them differently if the planning commission would like us to.
Anything else, Mr. Dwyer?
Just to add to that, especially with that corner lot up there, with no frontage on the cul-de-sac, that building is probably going to sit pretty far back in that lot.
Right.
And
Oh, yeah,
it may be the place to put mitigated trees where there could be future residential or some residential up there.
right. And what I should say, and thank you, Mr. Lippens, for bringing this to your attention. This is something else that we added to the plans that the commission asked last time was conceptual lot layout. So this isn't, this will be once there's a user and a lease in place, that kind of thing, then an official, lot split would, application would be made. So this is just a general schematic of the lot layout. It may have more frontage on that cul-de-sac. But yeah, we'd want to minimize impacts to any trees that are planted, so that's what we would want to do.
Thank you. While you're pointing out the map, I have a question of my own. In reviewing it, I was looking at your map on the existing conditions and survey plan, and when I was reading the review and then the consult report, it indicated the wetlands 1 through 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Right.
On this map, I see definitely wetland 1 and 3. Can you, either I'm missing it, or can you point out wetland area 2 and 4? And it's not exactly that, that map that you have there.
Right. Right. Look over at what you got. Yeah, we should.
It's the existing conditions and survey plan.
Yeah, we should identify which wetland numbers are which.
Yeah, on here is 1, on here is 3. 3 being at the north end of the project, 1 being just off the cul-de-sac to the northeast. I was trying to get a better concept of where areas 2 and 4 were, because on the report, I believe it was 1, 3, and 4 are going to be MDEQ regulated.
Right.
So where exactly is area 2?
I think 2 would be this one down here, just kind of, on this end, so.
So you're pointing at, just so the public and other commissioners can understand, it's basically to the south of where your proposed
Yes.
new road would
Yes.
be.
Yes.
Okay. So off the cul-de-sac, be the first lot to the south of the road,
Yep, to the right.
and it would be at the eastern edge of that.
Yes.
That's wetland number 2.
Yes.
And that is the one that is not regulated by the MDEQ, and that is the one that's going to take up the brunt of your proposed new roadway.
Right. Oh, no, the one that we're impacting is regulated by the DEQ, yes.
Which one is that?
So, I don't, in my head, I don't have the number in my head.
Okay.
I know it's in the wetland, you don't have the wetland report, do you, Jim? Mr. Lippens, you don't, I gave that to you, and I didn't bring a copy of the ECT's wetland report.
Let me look, I will
Yeah.
look.
I have I have it on my laptop in the car. I didn't print off a copy, sorry.
Okay, I appreciate you
Yeah.
trying to find the info.
Yeah.
So, at this point, and since you visited us last time in January, there's been progress on the MDEQ permitting process, correct?
Yes, so the application was made, and then there's it went to public notice, which was actually last month. There was a 20-day public notice that just ended like May 3rd, and there were no public comments. So now it goes to a field visit, which should have happened last week, and a permit, we expect a permit by June 6th. Or
Okay.
before, yes.
So, question from perhaps Mr. Cavallaro. In this process, that they've gone through the steps, they've gone, and I'm trying to give the public and everyone a good understanding of the process with the MDEQ in this circumstance. So they've gone through the process. There's been a public hearing. They're ready to be issued a permit. So a portion of this roadway is in the regulated MDEQ wetland. What happens?
Yeah, so they're going through this process now. There's the public notice because of the size of the impact, and once they hear back from the DEQ after their review, it sounds like since there was no public comments, the DEQ may have some comments and changing some things, may not, but typically on something like this they wouldn't, and then they'd issue a permit and they'd be set to start construction, and there'd be requirements in the DEQ's permit too of what they can and can't do.
Okay,
As far as soil erosion control and things like that.
so ultimately the MDEQ is has the responsibility of anything done in the wetland.
Correct.
Just to make that clear.
Correct.
Thank you. So even though they're proposing to put the road through part of it, the DEQ still may have requirements as necessary to permit what they're doing, but not necessarily to revamp what they're doing.
Yeah, they probably won't request revamping it based on what I've heard tonight.
Okay, very good. Any
Do you
other
have
questions?
Any additional input on?
No, it makes sense to me.
I could probably add to that, like when we submitted, there was actually, what do they call it, a correction that, basically they ask questions and we respond. So we did that before it actually went to public hearing. So we did go through a process, through a comment period with them.
Which is pretty typical also to have this corrections request, and then they would probably have submitted more information, which is probably, I assume, incorporated into this latest set of plans.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cavallaro.
So yeah, the correction request that Mr. Wagner's talking about is a pretty typical part of the process too. Usually make a couple revisions, then it goes to public hearing. They go through the public hearing process, and then usually they would issue the permit, shortly thereafter.
Thank you. So I saw the only other question I really have for Mr. Wagner is that and I have to preface it by saying I'm satisfied with the impact statement that was provided. It goes through and speaks of all the topics that I think we spoke about last time. On this report that was prepared, it said by environment, it's in item G, 1G, Threatened and Endangered Species Report was prepared by Environmental Consulting and Technology in March of this year. Who receives that report? I mean, it wasn't included in our packet. Perhaps Mr. Lippens or Mr. Wagner can answer.
No, it was not submitted. We extracted the recommendations out of that report and presented it to the township. So.
Okay, so this is a summary of the report?
Yes.
But the report wasn't submitted to
Correct,
to
that's
Mr.
correct.
Lippens or the
That's
township?
correct, yeah, he does not have it.
Okay, thank you. And my last question that I have is that we received in our packet from the Washtenaw County, I'm not sure exactly which report this is, because there was two possible reports, but it's one dated April 10th, 2018.
Yeah.
Mr. Cavallero, did you receive that report?
I don't know if I have that, actually. Was that from the Drain Commissioners, or the Water Resources
Yeah.
Commission?
Yeah, Water Resources Commissioner. You did not receive that?
It might have been in the link, actually, and maybe I missed it, yeah. So I did receive it.
Okay. In looking at that, this review's dated April 10th. I know the last revision on your plans was in March.
Right, and that's what would have been submitted to the Water Resources Commission, and then we received comments.
Okay.
We're about 95% of the way through those comments and plan on resubmitting and getting their approval.
Okay. And I was hoping that OHM could step us through some of the concerns from the Water Resources Commissioner. Basically, my concern is that I want to ensure that any of these items would not alter what's proposed here tonight.
Yeah, if you want to give me a second, maybe Rob, Mr. Wagner can talk about
Sure.
it, and then I can follow up.
Very good.
Based on what he says.
Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, they're all very simple. In fact, in the computer, we have all of those items addressed except for one, the planting of the plugs that they have you do in the bioretention area. That's the only issue that we need to add those before we resubmit to the Water Resources Commission. But they're all pretty I mean, that's actually a pretty good review letter from the Water Resources Commission, I think, when it's 1 or 2 pages like that.
Yeah, I'll also confirm that it looks like every one of the items is relating to a detail, but not a design change. So, for example, they're asking for a certain type of soil to be shown on a detail, some extensive seeding, that a certain plant seed mix is used, and then at the end of it, I guess they're asking for their review fees. So yeah, I'd confirm also that these should not change the grading of the site, the intent of what they have on their plans.
Specifically number 6, the maximum design infiltration rate. That being revised should not change anything. Specifically, it's on the worksheet, Mr. Cavallero.
Did you use something?
Well, yeah, I think we were using a higher infiltration, so the area of the infiltration basin gets a little bit.
It does get a little bit bigger?
Larger or something, but the engineering drawings would, that we bring to the pre-construction meeting would show that modification, but it's negligible as far as how much it would have to get larger.
So it's not gonna like impact more trees or anything like that?
Okay.
That would be the only concern, is that, obviously you don't have more trees impacted.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioners? Questions, comments? Ms. Chick?
We did receive an email from a resident who was concerned about the road going through the wetland area. And I'm reading that there's proposed wetland equalization pipes underneath the private road that maintain the hydrologic connectivity of the wetland on the north and south. So and the concern was also that they're on wells, is this going to impact anybody's well water? Or
No, and again, it'll be permitted by the MDEQ, and I tried to present on the plans and on the sheet that we're preserving, 98% of
Okay.
the wetlands. And what the equalization pipes are is they're just maintaining the hydrology of the wetland, tomorrow like it is today, so we're not affecting that at all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Iaquino?
I am very happy with their natural features impact statement as well. It meets everything that we asked for as a PC. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dwyer?
Just to clarify on timing, I presume now we've missed the window of clearing landmark trees because of bats and birds and bees and all that stuff, and you're still going to get permits, so is it likely that it'll be another year before you can actually break ground? It'll be this time next year at the earliest, is that the case?
I'm not sure we're going to.
Okay, thank
We
you.
want to do the clearing before March 31st, though.
Unless we cleared, when we start on October 1st, yeah, it might do that.
Okay, okay, thank you.
No more questions. Mr. Zarzaki?
I'm satisfied with what's been presented as well. Everything's been pretty well covered. The few items that will need to be adjusted are minor, and the DEQ will take care of the wetland issue. I don't see anything else at this point.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Infante?
I really appreciate the level of detail. My concern is that we're talking about the impact of just the road, and I think as far as ordinances, regulations, you really go in the 9 yards to make sure that you have covered everything. My concern is that we are making a decision looking through a pinhole, just because you talked about the conceptual lot layout, and it's a conceptual lot layout, so the impact of the road is all we can take into consideration, which is fine. It's just a little bit of a challenge because we don't have any idea what might be going in there and anytime soon. So I just want to say, I really appreciate that, but it is a bit of a challenge because the level of detail about the development of the lots and the timing of the development of the lots is, it's such a mystery. But again, there's no sketch plan required or anything. So
Right.
Thank you for the level of detail that you have.
Yep, thank you. We're hoping that you see site plans for these lots in the near future. So.
And Ms. Chick?
And those site plans, but again, you had said that they would have to go through the approval process as well, so any impact on the land there would have to be, we'd have to have the same information, so.
Yes.
And I would concur with Mr. Dwyer's statement on the mitigation, if possible, that that those plantings be on the northern or northeastern edge of the sites, if possible, Mr. Lippens, if that can be considered. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. In an earlier review, we talked about using those for screening of residential. I think you could make that a part of your motion. Certainly, we'll have to review the planting of the 4 additional trees. If the applicant's willing to move them, we can look at that too. I think it makes sense.
Are you acceptable of what we're suggesting?
Yes.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Krugler? All right, thank you. We could certainly add it in on the motion. So, any further comments from Mr. Lippens or Mr. Cavallaro? No? Okay. So I'd like to make a motion that the Planning Commission approve with conditions the Jomar Private Road north of East North Territorial Road and east of US 23 with the conditions listed in the McKenna report dated May 4th, 2018, being additional 4 trees are planted, that the species be red oak, white pine consistent with the species being removed. The conditions noted in the engineering review and the receipt of all required permits, and if possible that the mitigated tree plantings be in the northeast portion of the road construction.
Support.
Supported by Mr. Zarzaki. Any questions, comments on that? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Zarzaki?
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Ms. Chick?
Yes.
Zarzaki, yes. Mr. Kuzno is absent. Mr. Quinto?
Yes.
Ms. Infante?
Yes.
Mr. Dryer?
Thank you. Motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Wagner and Mr. Krugler, for your working on the things that the Planning Commission requested. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Planning Commission. Mary and Paul, Ron?
Okay, so moving on, unfinished business, which is the issues of that we just did on the public hearing. I'll make a motion that we send to the Board of Trustees. Before I make this motion, Mr. Lippens, can we do this as a group? Would it be a problem, or do we have to do it individually?
I don't see a reason why you couldn't recommend all of these as a group to be considered for approval by the Township Board.
Okay. In that case, that is what I would like to do, is wish to make a motion to send this forward for approval by the Township Board on items B, 10B through I. Is there support? Supported by Mr. Iaquinto. Any questions, comments on the motion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Ms. Chick?
Yes.
Mr. Zecchi, yes. Mr. Quinto?
Yes.
Ms. Afonte?
Yes.
Mr. Dryer?
Thank you. And we will go to item 10J. Further discussion of 2018 zoning ordinance schedule, urgent, minor, and major amendments. Mr. Lippens.
Would you like me to make another present? Hold on.
I'm assuming you had an update or alteration of the updates that the schedule we were following? Possibly not.
I gotta go back to the agenda.
Okay. I'll give you a moment.
Further discussion. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, I updated the schedule, and so you have a new updated schedule in your packet. The main thing being that we're close to finishing the technical audit. So I proposed that at our next meeting on 6/6, we review that technical audit, and at that time, discuss a revised schedule for minor amendments. I think that the technical review of that memo could be a fairly long discussion. So that's the note that is changed.
Okay, I'm sorry. Is it on page 2?
Yeah, it's on page 2. We had identified under section B, basically we just concluded the whole first part of the ordinance review.
Correct.
And we had identified already a few minor amendments that we thought we could proceed with. And we had discussed that the technical audit that we're conducting might identify some more. So at this time, rather than proceeding into those two minor amendments, my suggestion was to spend our next meeting reviewing the memo, the technical audit memo, and then
Okay.
we'll pick it up from there.
Okay, and we may not necessarily get through that whole memo.
My hope is that we will, but
Okay.
it certainly is more of a discussion meeting and I think that to consider amendments at that meeting might be too much.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions on that from Mr. Lippens? Mr. Dwyer?
Yeah, just a comment about Jomar Drive and natural features. I think there was some people thought that the natural features preservation applied to this Jomar Drive application originally. And maybe the intent was that it should, that it applies to everything that goes on in the township and needs to be read in conjunction with those, other ordinances. And the fact that it says that it's only site plan review or plat approval maybe there's an oversight that it hasn't been referred back to other things that are going on in the township, and maybe it should. And the other point I would make, had it applied to Jomar Drive, the fact that there's 100% mitigation on a heavily wooded lot with hundreds or dozens of landmark trees may not be appropriate for all situations. So I suspect that this may come up many, many times, and it may be something that we should review, both how that applies to the situations, where there are different situations as opposed to what we have now, which appears to be something that's very onerous, but only for a small number of, or a select number of situations. So I think that may bear review.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Chick?
If I'm correct, they were not required to do tree mitigation, right? That, because it's a private road, but they went
individual
above and
sites.
beyond to take the advice or the suggestions of the planning commission to do that, so I would commend them for doing that.
I do too, but my question would be, should they have been required as opposed to voluntarily doing it? And if they are required, should they have been required to replace 100% of landmark trees?
But that
or on a
wasn't-
heavy wooded lot, is that just unreasonable?
That's not under our jurisdiction, though.
Okay.
That, yeah, with a private road.
Okay. I mean, Mr. Dwyer's question, I think, is related to the looking at amending our amendment schedule. Is that what you're saying? You would like to have that addressed in addition to what Mr. Lippens is looking at?
Right.
So to keep it, okay.
Even if it just results in my understanding the whole thing better,
I agree.
and we don't change anything, then so be it.
Yes. Mr. Zarzaki, question on that? Comment?
No, I agree. We should look at it. There should be most likely a different requirement when we're dealing with industrial areas versus residential versus farmland. I mean, you know, you may have a farmer that decides he's going to clear a field to plant, and we can't expect him to replace 100% of those trees
Right.
if he's a true farmer and farming. Same thing with an industrial area. We've classified it industrial. We cannot, you know, assume we are going to apply the same standards that we would apply to a residential or to some other properties that are covered by the current ordinance.
Okay.
So we do need to look at it.
Ms. Chip?
I just want to make one more comment. And anytime we clear any kind of property, for whatever reason, it has an impact on the natural features. So, yeah, it is a discussion.
Mr. Lippens will look into that, I'm sure.
Made a note of it.
Thank you. Moving on, we'll go to new business. Item 11 on the agenda, discussion of Bark Park rules and regulations. Everyone received that in the packet. Mr. Lippens.
Yeah, this is the discussion that was brought to attention by Trustee Bellinger, who during public comment at the last Planning Commission meeting, and we requested that this be added to the Planning Commission agenda tonight to discuss it. Noting that this is not really something you would handle through zoning, but it is relevant to the charge of Planning Commission to plan and recommend policy to the board. You know, if the township were to consider a regulatory change, it would be part of the general code of ordinances. Similar to a leash law, you could consider, you know, rules for conduct in public spaces for animals. And we could certainly work with Planning Commission to prepare a memo or a resolution, if you would like, to forward something of that effect to the board. I believe in the packet, is there a copy of the rules? Yes.
Yes.
So that would be the starting point for the discussion tonight. And I'm happy to assist and provide any clarity on procedures or suggestions on procedures for taking this up.
Thank you. Mr. Aquino.
So, again, thank you to the PC for addressing this. The reason we have been pushing it on Parks and Rec is because we're pushing that these rules be turned into ordinances or some way to enforce them, is because there have been a lot of calls to the police department and to the township for individuals that are there noticing that others are breaking the rules. Primarily, some individuals coming in with more than the dogs that it states are allowed. And officers did respond, but they basically stated that they couldn't address it or do anything because there was no action they could take because there wasn't anything for them to enforce, because they were just set of rules that were set there. And again, things like that have happened quite frequently, and the Parks and Rec would appreciate whatever the Planning Commission could do to help pass this on to the board so that when there are situations like that, the officers or the township have ways to enforce a set of rules that are established so that everyone could get along peacefully.
Would you like to form the motion for Mr. Lippens?
I would ask Mr. Lippens to take these rules and address them to enforceable ordinances for us to recommend to the Township Board for approval.
My support. Questions, comments? Mr. Lippens?
I would make a suggestion for a friendly amendment just to include the township manager, that I work with the township
Sure.
manager.
You'd like to amend your motion?
Yes, sir.
I'll
Thank you.
still support that. Ms. Chick?
The motion would be that we're asking Mr. Lippens to create the ordinances, the rules that would be enforced.
So that he can turn this into enforceable ordinances for us to recommend to the Township Board.
So will you want him to create the ordinance, or do you want the board to create the ordinance? Or, this one,
I guess we,
Sorry.
from my past understanding, we've created the ordinances and then recommended to the board for approval. The board has to ultimately approve them so that they are in jurisdiction for the township.
So, Mr. Lippens, would this be a civil ordinance or a zoning ordinance?
This would be a civil ordinance.
Okay.
So it would be the purview of the board to create this ordinance. And from an advisory capacity, Planning Commission could make a resolution for the board to take it up. It certainly is within the purview of my role in supporting you as your planner to craft these things at direction of the board or at direction of the township manager. So I think a motion for me to take up this issue with the township manager is appropriate for Planning Commission. And I certainly, if I talked with the manager and he talked with the board and you said you don't want me to spend time on this, I could report back to Planning Commission to that on
Okay.
that. Alternatively, Planning Commission can make resolutions in support of a policy item for the board, and that certainly is a resolution that that Planning Commission could make. A resolution that this is a policy interest of importance to the Planning Commission, and they recommend that the board take it up. I think that the previous resolution suggested by Commissioner Iaquinto is probably sufficient. That would give me authority to talk to the manager about it and follow up.
All right, thank you for the clarification. I was confused. Thank you.
Okay, so any other questions? Mr. Zarzaki?
When you review this, make sure that we include the definitions for both owners and handlers, like under number 6 and number 9, we list dogs being controlled by their owners, but it would also have to include the handlers. Just like number 10 has only owners, need to include handlers, and so that we're making sure we're covering both conditions.
Good point. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor. Do a roll call vote, Mr. Zarzaki.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Ms. Chick?
Yes.
Zarzeki, yes. Mr. Quinto?
Yes.
Ms. Safante?
Yes.
Mr. Dryer?
Yes.
Passes all six.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Everyone receive a copy of the minutes from May 2nd.
Make a motion to approve the minutes with disbursement of reading.
I'll support. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. We'll go to final call of the public. Anyone wishing to address the planning commission may do so. Have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address.
My name's still Dave Gordon, 5558 Helena Road. I had a brief conversation with the Jomar people outside, and they said they're hoping to have possibly 7 companies coming into this area, which is exciting news. He says he doesn't have commitments from anybody, but once the road's built, he'll have a lot easier time selling the properties and selling the concept to the industrial park folks. And he also said that he did not find the process of going through this especially onerous, difficult, or he said it's a lot harder in Ann Arbor or Pittsfield Township, for instance, than it has been here. So I think that would be good news to for you guys to know that this is what they expected to go through, and they're happy to do it. So cool. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll go to comments from commissioners. We'll start with Mr. Iaquino.
I have a question for our planner. I am understanding, and I was told this, and for Mary, that anyone coming in to the township for any item, even a fence, has to pay and go through a zoning compliance review and pay $100?
Residential, 200 commercial.
Okay. I haven't seen that in our ordinances or something that we have, that is something we haven't required previously. So I am inquiring to this, is why is this policy starting now? And who enacted it?
So, I guess this is probably best handled by Ms. Byrd, but I don't believe there are any new policies that have been affected.
It's not in the policy, I believe it is in the ordinance, it's on the administrator's authorization. It does protect the business owners or the residents, if they place a home that's not within setbacks, and per se that home burns down, the insurance company will not cover it. So it's a fail-safe for them. It is in writing, so we really do have to back up. It's consistent. A lot of the phone calls of my neighbor is doing this has stopped.
But even like for a fence, okay, which again, it's not building, right?
It's not building permit, it's setbacks. She is approving the setbacks to ensure that that fence is on property. That owner has come in and said, that fence is on my property, it is not above 6 feet, or it is less than 6 feet, depending on what they're doing. And then when the neighbor calls, we can say, it was looked at, it was approved, they're okay.
So I'd offer a little assistance here too. I'd say, it's very important to make sure that the zoning ordinance is complied with, which is why we do a zoning compliance review. But not all zoning compliance reviews are of the same scale. So it's possible that the township could look at their fee structure to see if certain reviews are perhaps something the township might consider doing free of charge as part of general public services, particularly things that maybe are less involved than some of the larger scale zoning compliance reviewed. So my suggestion in that is to think about what the real issue is and what the real service the township is providing us.
My question, Mary, though, I don't believe that really happened several years ago. Is that correct? So is this something that, again, if it's in the ordinance, I'm fine with it, but it wasn't something.
For the 3 years that I've been here,
You have?
yes.
Okay.
It started with Kurt and it's continued with Vicky.
Okay. All right. I was just asked by a resident, so that's why I'm inquiring. Thank you. Nothing else, sir.
Thanks. Ms. Chick?
Yep, I have a question. I don't know if it's for Mary or for Paul, but either one, whoever has the answer. I understand that there's some new businesses coming into the downtown area. Are you aware of who they are and where they're going?
Well, Domino's. is
Yeah.
coming in.
There was somebody interested in the iron shop?
That one I'm not aware of,
Okay.
so they're not coming yet.
Yeah, I know that there has been a lot of activities for zoning compliance, and this evening I don't have an updated zoning administrator report, but I was aware of the Domino's site, and I'm aware that there's a lot of activity, which is a very good thing, and I'm not sure when the next quarterly report will come, but I think it's coming soon. It might be June.
Yeah,
Is
and
that correct?
my understanding with Domino's is there's the delay because of water. What kind of water issues are they having? Do you know? They have to put a well in? Oh, okay. All right.
That has been taken care of. So
Awesome.
they are moving forward.
All right.
Vicky is reviewing the process now.
Thank you. Good news.
Is that it, Ms. Chick? Okay. My only comment is that I would like to add, or to have correspondence as a topic for new business at the next Planning Commission meeting. So, Mary, if you could add that onto our agenda for the next meet. And I will provide further comment when we get to that point. So, Mr. Zarzaki? Thank you. Mr. Dwyer? Ms. Infante?
Thank you, no.
Thanks. The next regular meeting will be June 6, 2018. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Aquino, support by Ms. Chick. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you.